Hear the fullness of that story together as we turn to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, verses 1 to 3, and then 11 through 32. Hear with me God's word for us today. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this story. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me a share of the property that will belong to me." So the man divided his property among them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country to send him to his fields to feed the pigs. The son would have gladly filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So the young man set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to his father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then the elder brother became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to the elder son, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and he's come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. When a story has been told and retold so many times that you can almost recite it along with the teller, do you have any of those stories in your family? We certainly do. The time that Grandma commented on as Grandpa left for the grocery store, "I don't know how he keeps his pants up. He doesn't have anything back there to hold them up." The time my sister-in-law was so sleep deprived with a newborn that she kept calling her infant by the cat's name. The time I smeared Vaseline all over my brother's favorite Journey record. He still holds that against me. The familiarity of these around our own family dinner table is perhaps how we, as a family of faith, encounter this kingdom story of the prodigal son. It is a kingdom story. Remember, that's what parables are. Jesus tells them for all of those auditory learners among us to paint a picture when we just can't quite imagine it or recognize it in what he does. I wonder if he knew that we would respond so strongly to this story, where insistent mercy crosses every threshold to draw in both the repentant and the resentful. Maybe he did, because we've all felt lost at times. We've all been so relieved that our only response is joy. We can imagine ourselves in the younger son, impatient to leave home, the familiar, the known expectation, the fenced-in feeling for the excitement of a broader world. So we ask to go and are granted all that we need. We go far, far enough that customs are not the same as what we are used to. The rules are not the same. No one knows us. We can be whoever we want to be. But we go too far. We spend on every passion and every fickle thing that comes our way, flicking aside any caution. And then all of a sudden, we are with the pigs, wanting to eat what they eat. Be it starvation or fear or cunning, we're led to come back again to ourselves. We turn back to the familiar, to the known, to that assured place, willing to take the risk that we might be allowed back. And lo and behold, before we are even home, we can hear the feet running. The party is waiting. We can imagine ourselves in the Father, going along steadily, doing everything we can to hold things together. The impetuous one, who was like that since birth, makes a big ask with a big hope attached. And we say yes, praying the whole time. Days later disappeared and we hear nothing other than rumors. Sometimes in the darkest, sleepless nights, we fear the worst. The steadfast one, like that since adolescence, stays steadfast. And this is for us a lifeline. Sometimes we had hoped for a little of the other's impetuousness for that one, but in this time especially we give thanks for the steadfast. Then one day in the distance, we race towards the familiar outline. Our hearts are bursting. Before any words are said, we interrupt, bring out the best out, fire up the grill, set out the party favors. What once was lost now is found. Then not long after, we hear the other one outside. We're on our feet, moving there too. We're confronted, and we plead. Please understand, you are mine always, but so is the other one too. Come in, please come in, even if you can't celebrate with us. This is a deeply personal story for many of us. We who are impetuous, we who want to be forgiving. It's one in which we can find ourselves every which way and often in more than one place. No wonder we keep telling it. And it's one that we can, particularly in this time of Lent, make so individual that we might miss the resonance it has for us, the church. We recognize, as God's people, that God's grace is scandalous. And we could be forgiven the sin of thinking that this is just an allegorical tale of God's act for us. except for that very first part of the passage. The part before the words, "There was a man who had 2 sons." The part where we get the background for why Jesus brought it up in the first place. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them a story. Actually, he told them 3. The one about the shepherd who left 99 to find 1. The one about the woman who turned her house upside down to find a lost coin. And this one about the man who had 2 sons. He's not the first father in the Bible to struggle with the willfulness on the part of the younger son. It seems important that Jesus spends time here with the recovery of what was lost, with intention to go out of the way to make whole. And he's making this point not to the sinners and tax collectors, about which the religious leaders are clutching their pearls, those who were certainly perceived as having been lost. No, Jesus is talking to the grumbling religious leaders. Jesus is talking to the people who are trying their very best to live by the laws that they knew for generations, given by God who had led them from slavery into freedom, who celebrated with them on the other side of the Red Sea. Jesus was talking to the people who were doing everything they were supposed to be doing. In the meantime, were irritated by the company that he kept. And isn't it interesting that at the end of these 3 stories, in the culmination of the celebration for the retrieval of the lost, we don't actually know how it ends. Does the elder son cross that threshold to join the party? It seems as though his resentment might just keep him stuck right where he is, because he cannot bring himself to let go of his rigid expectation of the order of things. We can imagine ourselves in the younger son. We can imagine ourselves in the father. Can we imagine ourselves as the elder son, fulfilling every expectation said or left unsaid, taking on every given task, doing our due diligence to the people and things and customs of home? We watch the impetuous one go, assured that we have made the right choice, the better choice. We know the routines of home and take comfort in them. We know the name of every co-worker, the pattern of every day. We anticipate every need. We follow every rule. We are the ones who stayed, who are trustworthy. And then all of a sudden, there's a great celebration. The one who went away is home again, looking worse for the wear, if it weren't for all of the symbols of favor that have been laid upon him. And we are furious. Even before we can hurry away to hide and nurse that fury, there are footsteps, and a face appears pleading. We are furious. How could you? What about me? You never, after all that I have done. It is not fair. At its very core, this kingdom story is one about crossing thresholds. The younger son crosses it to leave and to come back. The father crosses it to welcome home. The older son will not cross it in order to go into the party. The father crosses again to plead. He consider again. We are here weekly as the church, affirming that God has crossed the thresholds of chaos, of empire, of doubt, of impassivity, of rejection, of death. to draw near to us. And still, I wonder sometimes if we in the church linger like the elder son, just on the outside, our feet stuck to the floor, unable to cast off the resentment that feels like a couple of 100 years of dead weight. Resentment that we are no longer the place to be on Sunday morning. Resentment that we no longer hold the voice we perceived we once held. Resentment that God has allowed us to get to this place in the first place. Stuck right here, we don't quite know what to do. And so we keep doing what we used to do. How do we get unstuck? Public theologian Brian McLaren gave a talk a number of years ago, just after he'd released his book, A New Kind of Christianity. In it, McLaren examines 10 questions that he's identified as those faced by today's church, including, what do we do about the church? The premise being that the church is at a distinct moment in our history, whereby we can, with joy and leaving behind resentment, fear, grief, anger, ask ourselves, what's next? That is, we can be unstuck. He urged those listening to remember one key thing. If what we say we believe is true, then Jesus continues to work, to save, to heal, to reconcile, to welcome, to make alive what was considered dead. So what if we just decided to see where he was going and go there ourselves? What if we decided to cross over that threshold and leave behind our burdens of what was and see what can be? What would that look like? Well, for one thing, there might be fewer articles about how the church is dying. For we know that Christ is alive. We would grumble less. We would worry less. We would worry not as much about keeping up an institution and more about making sure we were keeping care of people. We would welcome the ideas and the experience of those who have not been here for a lifetime, who may be new to what it is that we do. And what it is that we do might be changed because of what it is that they bring. We would embrace a spontaneous amen every once in a while in the midst of the congregation, and perhaps even add our own. I sure do hope that the elder brother eventually did cross that threshold with his father. I'm sure it took time. I am sure it was not easy. I know that he had the very best of intentions, the most devoted heart, and still, I sure do hope that he came unstuck. The one thing I know, though, God never gave up inviting him. Never has, never will. Thanks be to God.